right, this one is I'm gonna try to go quick with this one, just because I had an idea I wanted to capture, but it's really low battery. So what I want to say is that, so we do need help. We need to help ourselves, and we will need help from others. And this reality, it is merciful, and it does heal. One of the key, there's not a lot you can say definitively about life, but you can say that healing is a part of life, and that healing is indispensable in life. But there will be different things that will need to be, so sometimes, like, they've taken etymology out of schools, and so the real history of human beings is a lot of it is it's contained within etymology, because you can't entirely take the language away from the history and how the history informs the language. But a lot of us might not have a real grasp of etymology on a deep level. And the author, the YouTuber Tashik Bey, has said that he recommends, like, for people who are interested in, like, legal matters, to read books from, like, before, like, the 50s and 60s, before they had made certain changes, overhauled legal text. And one is called, like, Black's Law Dictionary, and I think that in the older editions that he recommends, and you can learn a lot about law, how it exists now. You can learn law almost better by reading older books, maybe etymology better. And then I've learned some things about spirituality and even science by reading things that are a little bit older from about that period, just like half a century and a quarter century before that book might have been popular with Arthur Avalon, where some of the older generations, they did a lot of things great, but they also understood a lot of things that have been a little bit lost and have also informed where we're at now. But sometimes within that, sometimes if you look at word clusters, you can also get insights if you just look at synonyms. If you were to one keen thing to be aware of, and you could also, this is another means of being aware, is that if you just were to look at synonyms, antonyms are words that are opposite, and synonyms that mean the same thing. But if you were to look at clusters of synonyms, sometimes you can gain insight and appreciation about life or fields of knowledge by appreciating clusters like that. And then if you were to engage that, then when you hear one of those words, you reflect on some of those synonyms or maybe antonyms, and that can give insight. So some synonyms would be like, you have like remedy, heal, amend, convalesce, atone. That might be different. Then there's probably more than that. Help, support, save. These are different degrees of addressing something that went differently than maybe we can imagine grace would want something, or would intend or have something, or maybe as a part of grace, sometimes the lesson or even certain degrees of damage are necessary. You need to do a certain amount of damage to be like a mechanic, or like we're at a body shop. I'd imagine that part of fixing the body of a car would you have to maybe further damage it a little bit. So I'm not saying damage is outside of grace and mercy, but you have different tiers. And so if something was great, it was going to help something, you have different degrees of help. First, you might help yourself, then your family might help you, then a healer might help you if you really had some healers on your hand in your community. You say professional, this and that gets into a little bit of a gray area, because now you have an economic incentive, where sometimes economics can actually exactly undermine an initiative, endeavor, a field that is a conflict of interest. So I'm benefiting, I'm thriving, I'm having prosperity because of another person's shortcoming, illness, marginalization, deprivation, isolation, shunning, trauma, abuse. I'm somehow getting benefit from that, even as I'm ostensibly helping that. I'm not saying it's just the footing of that. You have to appreciate the footing of that, because it plays out in the expression of that, in the experience. So when you get into professional, you do have the economic incentive, and so you could say that maybe our entire society may be corrupt as a monopoly game that has become corrupt simply because you have that economic incentive. You have the coercion and the incentive of money, that is self-interest, that is money, profit. I'm not saying there's not maybe enjoyment or liberties that can come around that. And I'm not saying I have a better idea currently, but I'm just saying that you have to appreciate the mechanics of anything to understand anything. And the mechanics of conflict of interest is imminent within a lot of fields of initiative in profession or endeavor. According to Nassim Nicholas Taleb, education and healthcare are prime examples of that, but you could easily say finance or mechanics or anything else. So because you can get a bad deal and shafted in anything, even going and asking for help at a doctor, and some words will tip you off like professional, but we do need help sometimes, and that might be the exact means of supporting a person, what you appreciate as a greater inspiration, higher power, higher understanding, higher consciousness would would not be it would not be wasteful. That's one thing I could maybe imagine about a higher consciousness, is that it's not wasteful. According to Arthur Avalon, that would make it immortal, to waste not. But whatever means are available and effective would be the exact means to be employed likely, not wasting anything, not the least of which expediency and position. So anyone, a professional, could be the exact person to help someone. So I'm none the ass to say that a professional couldn't be used by what's great to help someone, or use themselves to help someone. But there maybe you use a certain fork for a certain steak. You use a certain thing for a certain purpose, and the fork's not good or bad. It just was effective or not effective for a particular steak. But some things, you talk about spilling blood, that might not be able to be fixed by any mortal being directly, as we appreciate time. That is a higher level that requires atoning, because it's spiritual. Now, some things can't be remedied. You get past the point of remedy at that with some things, and because you have truly lost something when you have let blood fall to the ground, in my estimation. So therefore, you may need atoning, and that might be some of the real function of your like your outstanding people, like your saviors and messiahs, is that they have atoned for what could not be fixed by mortal means, as we appreciate time and space in linear reality. So that's actually a higher degree of challenge, and also healing is atoning, because you're within spiritual terms at that point. But I want to say that all of us have something of atoning in us, and atoning is necessary. For example, I sustained a very difficult deal where I purchased something that was not rendered as it was advertised, and that hurt me deeply, financially, personally, first financially, then personally, socially, economically. It would have went way worse if I didn't have support of family. But in that point, my family was actually atoning for the dishonesty of someone to make a significant deal, a professional, for lack of a better word, a group of professionals, an initiative, a venture, and then maybe my own dishonesty for even engaging them without doing my due research. It could be reason that you really can't entirely isolate dishonesty or honesty, unless it's just simple, because simple honesty. But you can't completely isolate where the true fault lied, the true dishonesty, I think, if you're being honest. But you can at least appreciate that that whatever helped me to survive, to sustain that, is a form of atoning. So the love of my family member atoned for that. I go through the public, and someone asked for help. Like the other day, someone asked me for food, and I had just purchased food, and I gave that to them. And just for the sake of teaching is the only reason I reference that. At that moment, I'm atoning for their lack with what I have, and that actually hurt me a little bit, because I got up somewhere, I'm already hurting, and I got up somewhere and I didn't have enough to pay for something. It's partly because of that expenditure, but just I'm not crying about that. But I'm saying that we as human beings, we atone for one another to different degrees and in different circumstances. And that's part of, we're not actually responsible for what we help someone with. We're only responsible for our love and being a conduit and agent for something greater, to help a person with the actual standing, footing, respect, credit that someone that loves us would have. And that can be used to help us, help atone for us. But we don't want to take advantage of anything, not least of which atoning. So what I say is that none of us have to be perfect, because if we're perfect, then at that point we would no longer be humble, so we would no longer be perfect. None of us are expected to be perfect. But what it is that, but you still have an appreciation for morality and justice and righteousness. And by you having an appreciation, the way you come into, the things that work for you and the things that don't, the triumphs that you make and the blunders that you make, you come into them at a certain angle that you can sustain and survive and surmount both the enjoyment and the deprivation of your own doings, by having a general appreciation for righteousness, worship, faith, these different things. They put you into a situation in such a way that you can sustain it likely and have the footing. A lot of times you get into a situation and the footing was already established before the situation transpired, and that footing is going to amount to how something is sustained and overcome or survived, is the actual footing leading up to and within and beyond a difficult situation. So your footing may be benefited by having morality, justice, righteousness, and awareness of upstanding things. And then also the lessons that you learned are